Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Friday. Got a bit of news to talk about today. Antonio Rudiger's potential exit, Declan Rice, transfer speculation over the West Ham midfielder, and also the futures of Barkley and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. But before we get into any of that, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also hit a like button if you're enjoying the content because it helps out the channel as well. Let's start off with Antonio Rudiger. This news breaking a couple of hours before kickoff against Barnsley on Wednesday night from Matt Law in the Telegraph, which revealed that Antonio Rudiger would not be in the squad once again against Barnsley and is set to leave Chelsea after being left out. Antonio Rudiger set to leave Chelsea. Telegraph Sport can reveal that having been frozen out of the squad for the defeat to Liverpool, Rudiger has once again been omitted from the Chelsea squad, which of course happened against Barnsley as well. And it now seems that Antonio Rudiger and his agent are looking for a new club. He's been told by Lampard he's not part of his plans and will be leaving this transfer window. Quite shocking news, to be honest. And just right out of the gate here, if you don't know already, I'm quite a fan of Antonio Rudiger. He's one of my favourite players in the current squad, has been in recent seasons, basically since he joined from Roma in 2017. I mean, in terms of that 2017 disastrous transfer window, he's really the only one, maybe, of course, Caballero as well, still in the squad, that, you know, has been a positive from that transfer window, to be honest. But Rudiger, to be honest, his future has been in doubt. I think with all those centre-backs, to be honest, in terms of what the centre-backs were going to look like, especially with Thiago Silva arriving this summer, and you felt like one of those could be leaving. It seemed like Tomori actually was most likely to go out on loan. That doesn't seem to be the case now. I think with Tomori breaking in against Liverpool, coming off the bench in that game for Christensen, starting again with Thiago Silva on Wednesday, and I think we'll probably likely feature against West Brom on Saturday, I think that's a twist of fate once again that's favoured Tomori. And then you were looking at Andreas Christensen and also Antonio Rudiger. Rudiger yet to play this season for Chelsea, and it seems like a bit, almost the David Luiz situation, I think, which I've seen some people reference this to, where Rudiger, although maybe is popular in the dressing room with some players, it seems like maybe there's been a falling out between him and Lampard, maybe a mutual agreement that he's not part of his plans this season. And now he's going to look to cut ties and move away. I think in the case of Rudiger, as I say, I'm quite biased towards him because I think he has been one of my favourite players. And I think it's a shame with Rudiger. And I think the turning point is the injury. I do. I think when we look back at Rudiger's career, for me, it was going very much in an upwards direction. I think Rudiger, when he joined from Roma in a difficult season in 17-18 under Conte, I think he was one of the best performing players that season in a very difficult year for Chelsea. I think he was brilliant in the FA Cup final. I think consistently throughout that year, even at times when I think he was frozen out by Conte, I think he always shone through, I think, in that year. And in the next year, I think he went up to another level with Sarri, to be honest. I think him and Luiz created a decent partnership, to be honest. And just as we were getting to the tail end of that season, you felt like Rudiger, at least for next season, was going to become Chelsea's best defender, was probably Chelsea's best defender, and was really going to assert himself as an even better defender. Then he gets that major injury and it sets him back. Frank Lampard arrives and he doesn't actually come back. He gets a double injury, I think, came back against Wolves at the start of last season, and you thought, okay, now he's going to break into the first team. Got re-injured on his return, and then I think he wasn't back till December. And I think there was a lot of contributing factors to his decline in form, to be honest. I think the system, the chopping and changing, I think injury. You don't know what injury is going to do to players, how they can set back them in several ways, especially considering the age of Antonio Rudiger. And I think, he's consistently made mistakes recently. And with Lampard wanting to mould his team and very much get that back four settled, you knew one of them was going to drop out. And I think Rudiger has definitely, obviously been the one that's now going to drop out for Chelsea. Where he goes, I know there's been apparently links to Napoli and PSG, whether those clubs would be interested in taking him. I think there was a concern over the summer with Rudiger, if potentially was going to be the one to leave, was his injury record. Would a club want to go towards that? Could it be a loan with an option to buy? But then you're looking at the centre-backs now, and I know there's been some reaction outside of the club, which is interesting to me. If you listen to like podcasts and pundits, especially on TV, when they talk about Rudiger is always one of those ones that's instantly named as like when they ask what's the best back two for Chelsea. And it's interesting to me because as a fan, and as we talk generally on this channel, I don't assume that, even though I'm a fan of Rudiger and want to see him succeed and like him in the squad. That's not the way we look at it, to be honest. And I wonder if that's just sort of a distance view from someone rather than actually like an intricate sort of detailed view of watching Chelsea week in, week out, because Rudiger, by all standards, I think was one of the most poorest defenders we had last season, and a very poor defence, to be honest. But I think, just the level of mistakes, he was never that commanding presence and sort of leading defender that he had been for me over the previous 2 seasons. But I also think, the twist of fate, I look at the likes of Andreas Christensen, more in the case of Fikayo Tomori, who I think has benefited once again. As I said with the David Luiz situation, could this be another case of not only the Christensen red card last week, which of course led Tomori to come off the bench in the second half, but also Rudiger leaving, potentially that giving Tomori another chance to break into the first team. We could see basically a part 2 here, which I think is good for Tomori, given he's a much younger defender. I think has a lot of potential, and that could really benefit him with Thiago Silva alongside him, battling with Kurt Zouma and Andreas Christensen. Lampard clearly wants 4 centre-backs. I don't think we should allow both Rudiger and Tomori to leave. I think that would be a massive mistake. I think it limits Frank Lampard's ability to potentially play a back 3, and also if one of them goes down with injury, that's really bad for the squad, to be honest. And I don't really want Dave being featured in a back 2, to be honest, because he's rarely done it throughout his career. So I think, it does look very likely now that Rudiger being left out of the squad twice, considering him being a senior player within this squad, an older player within this squad, I don't think is good. I hope it's settled soon. I probably will make videos if it is revealed he is going to be leaving the club, thanking him for his time, because he has been one of my favourite players in the squad. But that's the case of the current Chelsea team, and I think you're going to be seeing more players like this. It's the natural case of evolution within the squad. Lampard finding his best 11, a lot of players coming in this summer. Those just aren't going to make it. There's going to be casualties, unfortunately, at a club like Chelsea, at any club, and you just have to deal with that, unfortunately. So it does seem like Rudiger will be leaving this summer. Please let me know your opinions on this news. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? Let me know in the comments below. Next, obviously, I want to talk about Declan Rice. Potentially the last signing of this ridiculous summer transfer window. Fabrizio Romano tweeting yesterday after Mendy was confirmed as a Chelsea player. Chelsea have not made any official bid yet for Declan Rice. Talks on with his agent, but now it's time to sell, loan out players. Then Chelsea will open talks on next days with West Ham. West Ham insist they won't sell Rice, but player is pushing to join Chelsea. Also want to reference a great Twitter account that I suggest you go and follow, Dan McCarthy. Hopefully getting him on the channel, a great source in terms of Chelsea transfer news as well. Just saying here in a thread in regards to Declan Rice, I'm told a bid from Chelsea depends fundamentally on outgoing business, very much following up on what Romano has said, getting money in, trimming the squad and opening up midfield opportunities. Those around this are very confident a bid will go in. How much to be decided? I've heard figures similar to those shared on here. We will see. Nevertheless, Chelsea's board are wary on spending too much on a player who is released from their academy for obvious reasons. Chelsea will not pay West Ham 80 million up front. Will players be included in the deal? Too early to tell. This will heat up in the coming days now. So there's been a lot I've said on this channel about the fee, and just for today, I'm going to forget the fee, to be honest, because I think that can sometimes get boring. I was on the Byline podcast, the Alex Goldberg podcast, with Jay McIntosh, who I think as well I'll be getting on as a guest on the channel too, and we were discussing Declan Rice a lot. Definitely suggest you go and listen to that podcast, link in the description box below, because we talked about a lot of big Chelsea issues earlier in the week. But one of the things we talked about with Declan Rice was sort of forgetting the fee and just looking at the player, to be honest, because I think a lot of the time as fans, we sort of clamour over the fee, really obsess over it, to be honest, when it's not our money, to be honest. And also, just I think it can get a little bit boring, and we can almost limit ourselves talking about the actual qualities of the player and what they can actually bring to our squad, and constantly talk about that fee. So what do Chelsea's midfield lack, in my opinion? We lack balance. We really lack it. You saw it against Liverpool. You saw it against Barnsley too. We lack a natural DM in that area. Simon Johnson wrote a piece earlier in the week about how Kante isn't really thought of now as a natural DM, which is interesting to me, because looking at what Frank did when we returned for Project Restart, Kante at the base of midfield, but now apparently Lampard is going away from that, maybe because he can sign Declan Rice. He doesn't see Kante as that holding lone DM. But just looking at all the midfielders, I think you have a balance issue. So you have Jorginho, who's a good passer, can dictate tempo, but doesn't have great mobility and can be pressed and isolated, as we've seen continuously, especially with the high press Chelsea want to instill, and that doesn't suit Jorginho's style of play. You've got Mateo Kovacic, who I think is a very good tackler, better mobility than Jorginho, but placing him deep, limits his game, and is not naturally defensive as well. And then you've got, of course, N'Golo Kante, who can do a lot. And I also think, there's always been this misconception that he's a holding midfielder. He's never been a holding midfielder in his career. He has never played the Makelele role in his career successfully. And I think there has been that concern of placing him there, transforming in that role so late on in his career could be of detriment to him. And we have seen in the past how he can massively benefit Chelsea in an attacking sense as well as a defensive sense. So I think he's such a unique talent that I think you're limiting him just placing him in that holding role. Yes, we know intercepting is a major part of his game, but he can do that high up the pitch as well. And it's about finding that balance for me. And then you look at Declan Rice, what can he bring? A natural DM. He can break up play, adds that mobility and strength to that midfield, which neither Kovacic nor Jorginho can add. And also not losing a passing ability or vision 2 within a player. That's my concern with Chelsea looking to be more progressive, is I think you've got a nice balance with Rice of a player that can be defensively very solid, very strong, mobile, but can add that vision 2 to that midfield to help out in our attacking play too. Also has the versatility, as we've heard for many months now, Frank wanting him to play centre-back as well. But I think predominantly DM is the big thing for me now. And I think that's the concern for me, because I think the gap between Chelsea's defence and midfield needs to be rectified. I actually think that's a bigger problem than just the defenders themselves, the centre-backs themselves. I think that's the structural problem for Chelsea recently, and I think that needs to be rectified definitely. And maybe a player like Declan Rice could add that definitely. Please let me know your opinions on Declan Rice, because I know, forget about the price and just judge the player on his own ability. I know everything now is centered around price. We've seen this with Kepa Arrizabalaga, the massive fee. But what do you think Declan Rice can bring to our midfield? Can he rectify the problems and issues we've seen on transition for Chelsea? And can he improve our squad? Please let me know in the comments below. And lastly, I think this is very much tied to Declan Rice. And signing Declan Rice, as both Fabrizio Romano and Dan McCarthy said, was selling players now, loaning players out. We've seen this, Acosta leaving, Bakayoko on the verge of leaving too. I'm sure there's other players on the way out. Of course, Michy Batshuayi going out on loan to Crystal Palace. And now we've got Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Ross Barkley being linked with a loan or potentially a permanent move away. More in the case of Ross Barkley than Ruben Loftus-Cheek, but both of them being linked to West Ham, Aston Villa and Southampton in recent days. I've always said about Ross Barkley, I think, he's a guaranteed profit for Chelsea. He really is. If Chelsea can get a permanent fee for him, it's always going to be more than 15 million, especially what he's given to Chelsea. He's played a little bit more than expected. He's not exactly the most fringe player, I'd say. It's not like he's isolated, cut out of the team like a Michy Batshuayi. He does get substantial minutes, I think, considering what you'd expect Ross Barkley to get for Chelsea. I think at times he's a little bit underrated by Chelsea fans. I think he's been consistently actually pretty decent for Chelsea in terms of form when he's actually been on the pitch. I think it's always that case with Ross of trusting him week in, week out. I think he's a good impact player for Frank Lampard. As you saw against Brighton, I think he had decent moments scoring that goal against Barnsley too. But it's just consistently, I never think he'll be a regular first team player, that player you rely on week in, week out, but does add something definitely to Frank Lampard's team that maybe other more naturally talented players give you. So I think that's always been an interesting thing, which may mean that Ross actually stays. And Ruben Loftus-Cheek, I spoke about Ruben after the opening game against Brighton, or the criticism around that performance. It's tough for me with Ruben, and a bit like Rudiger, obviously I've got a bias towards this player. I can see him leaving on loan. I can, just when I look at it objectively. And I think the main thing is, given his injury, given the need for minutes, is he going to get consistent minutes at Chelsea this season? If Frank continually plays a 4-2-3-1, if Kovacic, Kante, if we sign Declan Rice, if we maybe keep Jorginho as well, where's Ruben going to fit within that? That's the concern for me, because I think Ruben's best position is, say, in a midfield three, and if Frank is going to be playing sort of a 4-3-3 consistently, and very much Kai Havertz is dominating at number 10, where does Ruben fit in, to be honest, as that sort of attacking midfielder? Maybe he could play in a 2 alongside a Kante or maybe a Declan Rice if he was to arrive, or a Kovacic. I just wonder, where does Ruben fit in? And I think for his own career, for his own health and fitness, obviously I've heard that Ruben wants to stay and fight for his place, which is good, but a lot of players say that, and it's just in terms of realistically getting into that team, it is so stacked in that area. And I just wonder, consistently, week in, week out, getting those minutes. And the importance of having a big squad is massive this season, considering how congested it is. But just naturally, if players stay fit, which we hope they will, if Ross is ahead of the pecking order from Ruben, I think that's a concerning thing. For me, Ruben, it's one of those games for Barnsley where I'm like, this is a game he should be like nailing down in terms of, I'm going to be the starter, okay? And maybe I'm not the regular starter in the Premier League 11, but especially for a Carabao Cup game against Barnsley, I've got to be in the starting 11. The fact he wasn't was a major surprise to me, and clearly clearly that Brighton performance may have impacted his chances in getting in that starting 11, and the fact that when Ross Barkley came on for Ruben against Brighton had a positive impact. Objectively, I lean towards Ross Barkley staying because I think over the time Frank Lampard has been at the club, Ross Barkley has been more positive, and that's down to him being more fit than Ruben Loftus-Cheek. In the case of Ruben, there's that massive potential, but you look at players like Kai Havertz and Mason Mount getting loads of minutes this season. Where is Ruben going to fit in? That's the concern to me. It does seem like if Ruben goes out on loan, Chelsea are going to have to pay some of his wages, especially if he does go to a team like Southampton. It could be beneficial towards him. People pointed to, say, Kurt Zuma a few years ago getting a major injury, going out on loan to Stoke and Everton, and then returning later down in his career and still now being a first-team player. Potentially the same thing could happen to Ruben. I'm not entirely sure. I'm conflicted on this, to be honest. I think one of these two will leave on loan. If Chelsea are insistent on getting Declan Rice, one of those midfielders will have to make way. Please let me know who you think it will be in the comments below. But that is it for this edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.